All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Joan, roll call, please.
Director Hockert. Here. Director Kelsenberg.
Here.
Director Lauer.
Here.
Director Petrie. Here. Director Porbeni.
Here.
Director Seelander.
Here.
Chair Sherman.
Here. Great, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will go ahead and make a motion to approve tonight's agenda. Can I get a second?
So moved.
Great, we'll go with Dr. Kelsenberg on the second. All those in favor of approving the agenda, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Agenda approved unanimously. Moving on to the consent agenda. It's up on the screen for those watching at home, items A through E. Is there a motion to approve tonight's consent? Great. Director Lauer with the first, and is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Director Hockert. All those in favor of approving tonight's consent agenda, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Consent agenda passes unanimously. We are going to move next and bring Carissa up here to talk about our district handbook. We need to take action on that this evening.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, Dr. Funk, Board Chair Sherman, and members of the board. Every fall, we are required to inform parents about the district policies and required notices, as well as the rights and responsibilities of students and guardians. All of this information is included in the district's student handbook. The handbook is published electronically and can be found on the district's website. Families are expected to review the handbook each year and complete a sign-off form in PowerSchool. And this year's handbook has been updated to reflect changes in legislation or district policies, and it contains summaries of important policies with links for families to view. Families will be receiving multiple communications from their child's school, as well as in district communications, directing them to the online handbook and required sign-off form. So at this time, I'll just be asking for your approval of the district student handbook.
Any questions, comments? Any changes that you would like to highlight of note specifically, I guess, other than the legislative, which we all are aware of here?
Yeah, there's really not. I mean, much of it is just updating the policies that you've been updating
Yep.
throughout the year, so making sure that links are working and that all the information is up to date. But there haven't been any dramatic changes to this year's handbook.
So if we change something like cell phone policy at some point during the school year, which we're mandated to do by law, then will that be reflected in the handbook, or will the board have to come and reapprove the handbook, or will the policy, I would imagine, would trump the handbook at that point in time?
What we have tried to do by having it electronic is that we can do those updates throughout the school year, so it's always live in real time. As far as a policy update, if you do approve a policy, that's going to obviously be on the books when it's approved, and we would add information then at that time to the handbook.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, is there a motion to approve the handbook, the revised handbook? Okay, Dr. Porbeni, is there a second?
Second.
Great. Director Petrie, the second. All those in favor of approving the updates to the handbook, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Handbook passes. Thank you for
so
handling
much.
those. All right, under strategic direction D, we have developed strong partnerships with the communities we serve, and we have a couple different reports. The first will be the new elementary bond report.
Good evening, Chair Sherman, members of the board. Tonight, we're here. I have two guests with me here, Paul Aplikowski and Valerie Peterson from Wold Architects here. We will be talking about the new elementary schools at both Bayport Elementary and Lake Elmo Elementary. This will be our third presentation here. The first one is when we started core planning. Core planning, just a real refresher, was when we kicked off this process, we had about 20 to 25 stakeholders for each building of parents, teachers, community members, office staff, support staff, et cetera, to look at setting the design criteria, to take a look at tours and other facilities around the area of new sites, and then set adjacencies to the building, kind of where is the lunchroom close to the cafeteria, where are the grade levels, where's the gym, the music room, cafeteria, et cetera. Then from that, we came and kind of have a great presentation about the adjacencies, kind of that bubble map, if you remember, of kind of where just things landed. Then we moved into user groups. User groups is where we met with staff for each of the sites or each of the spaces within the site. So all the different classroom areas, special education, music room, art room, cafeteria, receiving, custodial, kitchen, cafeteria, et cetera, just to look at each space and really dig into the details of that. What does flooring look like? What does lighting look like? Where do we want outlets? Where's storage? Where's cabinetry? All those sorts of things. And we had a couple rounds of those user groups. And then now we're going to head into our bidding phase. So before we start to get into the bidding phase and really finalize the documents, we want to come here and present what we have as of now, kind of the building adjacencies, as well as to see what the exterior as well as some of the interior renderings are of our new elementary schools. As we go through each one of these phases, we also kind of do a budgeting process for each one of them to kind of mirror where we are in our design based on where we're seeing current trends within bidding throughout the metro area. So we run through two bidding process. Wold has a process that they do with their own. Kraus Anderson, our construction manager, does a totally separate one. And as we kind of finish each one of these phases, they both do their budgeting of the building and kind of compare where we're at and see if we're on budget or not. Ultimately, the budget day comes down to bid day. So we kind of want to see where we are on track from now, but really that big number is what happens on bid day. So the images you're going to see here tonight are, as we sit here tonight, are on track to keep us on budget. So we'll keep moving forward with the project, but would like your input with some of the things that you're going to see here this evening. So with that, I will turn it over to Paul and Val to kick us off. We'll start with Bayport Elementary. We'll kind of go through that facility, kind of take questions on Bayport specifically, and then we'll jump into Lake Elmo afterwards. So please, as we go along, please ask questions and feel free to jump in as you see fit.
Thank you.
We don't need to hit the button, right? We just.
Nope, sorry.
No, I think this button.
No, I don't think you need to do that. It's
Okay.
live. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here, and this is always an exciting part of our process is to actually share the design of all of the data that we've collected and collected from a number of users along the way. So starting with Bayport, just a refresher, this is a new elementary school up to 5th grade. It'll have about 600 students, and it's about 96,000 square feet. As Mark alluded to, we are wrapping up, getting close to issuing our construction documents to head out for bidding this fall, and the construction would start early spring.
I think just as part of the process, we do have a phase before we can award bids, and that is to get through the city, county, and watershed approval. So that is a current topic that we're working through in all jurisdictions right now.
So some of our core planning group had some thoughts on, to guide us along some of the design, so I thought I would revisit some of those, that the spaces should be bright and transparent and invite nature into the building. It should be easy to navigate, and it should be very engaging for the students while they're there. The gathering spaces should be accessible to the school as well as the greater community, and the design should be adaptive, flexible, and encourage collaboration. So to start out with, we thought we would start out with the site plan. So this is a kind of an existing analysis of the site. So you can see the school's property on the left side, and then the existing city park for Barker's Alps over on the right that is going to remain a park. So the property that the district has acquired on the left starts to identify some of the topography that I think people are aware of in that area, and just how we had to work around the topography to eventually site this building and locate it within this property. So here is a site plan of the building. It has our parking and our parent queuing up in the front, so that would be on the north end of the white building that's outlined here. We have our bus parking, which will also act as expanded parking for the city park off to the east. And then the building is kind of nestled towards the existing forest or trees and the hills. Around that, you'll start to see some of the hard surface playground, and even an outdoor learning center on the south end of the building.
I just had a couple of questions here. Down there, that gray circle, what is that down there at the bottom? Is that a paved pathway, or that's not for vehicles, is it?
Well, it's for emergency vehicles only.
Okay.
So it would only be utilized for emergency vehicles to help get a fire truck around a building to access the building for in case of emergencies. So it's not for normal vehicle use.
Okay,
That they need to go around the whole building, and that big kind of lollipop there, the circle, is for them
Yeah.
to turn around.
a turnaround, okay.
So it's not just for everyday traffic, but it's access for emergency vehicles to make sure they have access all the way around the site.
It primarily functions as pedestrian pathways, though, 99%
Okay,
of the time.
yeah, that's what I was wondering,
Yep.
because the outdoor learning space, that's where, the People's Church might want to use that on the weekends, and then they can bring wheelchairs along that space there to
Correct.
access that, is that
Yep.
correct?
Yep, that would be an accessible route to that area.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And then the other thing I just noticed that I really like on this design is the row of vegetation or trees or shrubs, or I don't know what that is, in the parking lot. And I think that's just a really nice way to set off it looks like the parent drop-off space is right there. So, just a comment, I guess.
So now we will start to get into the floor plan a little bit, and this has not changed from our last presentation. We've just added more walls and doors and a little bit more detail to it. So the areas in the green are really the classroom learning areas, the learning studios. The blue is the gym. So I'll start to walk you in from the main entry that's centered on the north. So when you come in from the main entry, which would also serve as our parent pickup and drop-off area, we have our administration area in the brighter orange, the more peachier, brighter orange. If we were to take a left through those doors and go past the gym, we have our cafeteria that's indicated there in the purple. We have our kitchen and some of our building maintenance area in the gray, our boiler rooms. Across from the cafeteria, we have our music and instrumental area. And then now going back towards the main entry, in the more pumpkin-y orange, that is our special education zone. And then the lighter blue area is our learning commons. Traditionally, that's where our media center classroom would be. That's where some of the books and some of the very large group learning could also happen. And then the building really divides into the three different wings for pre-KK, first and second grade for those different learning studios. And then upstairs, we have our third, fourth, and fifth grade learning studios, as well as an art classroom for a specialist upstairs.
I'm assuming that, the buildings that get created these days are more cognizant of safety and all of that sort of thing. Can you explain the lockdown lines in these buildings?
Yes, and I don't know if a pointer works, but so you can start to see the lockdown line term that's right between the media commons and the main entry. There's a pair of double doors there. So if there was an event, there's a button at the front desk that could be pushed, and those doors would close, as well as the doors to all of the different learning studios. So each one of those wings is also connected with those doors would close and lock.
All of them at the same time?
All of them at the same time. Yep. Kind of like sometimes fire alarms go off, and then you see the corridor doors start closing down. It behaves very, very similar to that.
Okay, good, thank you.
Also, if I can just piggyback on there, in each one of the pods, there's two ways out. So you have the main way out, or there's also a back stairway or a back door out to each of the pods as well. So there's multiple exit points for each one of the pod areas, or classroom areas as well.
Do any of the teachers have a button that they can push to lock down their own area, or is it just that one button in
As
the
of now,
administration?
it's just the button in the office
Okay.
area.
Can I go back really quick, just to the drop-off, the parking lot area? I get some comments that sometimes our parent drop-off is a little tight, and that some of the lines back up. Has anything we've learned from other projects that we've done been taken into account here? Like I know, for example, Brookview, sometimes people will tell me that it can get a little backed up, and
So here's the push-pull of where
Yeah.
cities, counties want, and then where city councils and parents and neighborhoods. So a lot of people close to it want as little pavement or asphalt as possible. And then you get to traffic studies, and the city and the county want 0 stacking on the road, and they want all the stacking within the site, so there's no backup within the roads. So those are conversations that Paul kind of alluded to now of some of the permitting, some of the conversations right now, is to balance that of kind of where neighborhoods and where families want versus what traffic studies, city and county want, to get a balance of stacking on site, how does that look to in and out? So there's not a magic button or what we learned, it's really navigating some of those processes.
Okay. And then the other area I had, and this is kind of in general, when we're looking at the first floor design and kind of some of the sped outline, this is probably more for superintendent. Every school seems to have like a specialty program maybe that they have in their building. Maybe it's a sped program or an autism cluster or something that would be, do we envision, or are you envisioning this for any specific cluster, and how does that impact the design?
Okay.
So this one is, if you look at that peachy orange, that would be the CIP or the autism program that is here. So not all of our elementary sites have it, but there are quite a few that do.
Okay.
So.
But other
it's a-
than that, nothing that at this point that's identified.
But ask the same question for Lake Elmo.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so Lake Elmo has the medically complex, so
Okay.
that will continue. This is a new added program, so currently, there's the CIP program at Lily Lake. That program has grown the last few years, so we're trying to add some southern presence to that as well. So we will keep the lake, or the Lily Lake site as well, and then add a site to Anderson.
Perfect. Okay, so
So
it's good.
this will be a new site in addition to the 4 that we currently have at Stonebridge, Lily Lake, Rutherford, and Lake Elmo.
Good. I appreciate the thought that goes into that, so thank you very much.
Another thing I'll point out, since we're still on this floor plan, is the stress of the community use building. Schools are often used a lot by the community. That lockdown line to the left of the gym in the special ed program also allows the right side of the building to be used after hours, so that different activities can utilize the gym or the cafeteria. All right, so now we're going to kind of zoom into one of these learning studios. So we just had a discussion a little bit on our specialized special ed cluster. However, special ed is being served in all of the classrooms, so it's indicated here in that orange as well. We have 4 classrooms for grades 1 through 5, or K through 5. And then within those areas in the middle, we have flexible learning areas where the classrooms can really break out and teachers can break out, and as well as the students can extend their learning and do different activities. Essentially, we also have a shared locker area towards the front of the pod, and then a staff room so the teachers can collaborate together, schedule together, and do some work together as well. There's medium group rooms and small group rooms, which can be utilized for students, but it's also a great opportunity for paras and some additional intervention supports to actually come to the students without the students having to travel across the building to go get the services they need. So that was a big goal of the core group as well, is to try to have more adults come to the students than the students going to an adult.
A couple other features we should point out. Each one of these learning studios has its own locker area, which we're terming a mudroom, and its own toileting facilities. So it really is meant to be sort of a self-contained wing for that grade. And we've been using the term learning studio. It's up to your district to decide if you want to use that. But it's an attempt to rebrand the idea of the classroom pod. It's really meant to be a much more collaborative space. The idea is that you have the teachers and staff, staff, and students working together in that. And certainly they can be divided into 4 classrooms if they so choose, but it also provides lots of opportunities for different groupings, co-teaching, all those kinds of things to happen within the space.
And some of that's indicated even with, you can tell that the classrooms kind of look a little bit different. They have 2 of them are paired together so that they have an operable wall between them to really allow a large multi-class learning area. And all of this was discussed through core groups as well as user groups about the different types of functions that teachers would like to be able to do and deliver their education to the students, and trying to really make the space agile for all of that.
And then we'll go to Pete.
So I see that there's a is that like a little green room? Does every space have something like that?
Correct, yep.
Okay, all
Yep.
right.
And there's actually 2 in each studio.
There's a smaller one in the orange
The
area.
sped breakout area is
Oh,
meant for
has
sort
one
of a
as well.
de-escalation kind of a room.
Got it,
And the other
okay.
one, per the core group's instruction, was created to be more available to all students.
Okay. And then I have a question that's probably either a Mark or a superintendent question, which is, you know, it looks to me like these classrooms are very different from what the current teachers at Anderson are used to. And I'm just kind of wondering how that's going to affect the way they teach, and are we going to be helping them with making a transition to a different way of organizing their classrooms?
I'm going to have Mark answer this. He's been working with the teachers as part of the user groups, and I think depending on what group of teachers he's working with, there's different opinions on their thoughts on this.
So going back to design is we're building a facility that isn't going to open 3 years from when we even start. And so we're not looking to what trends are now. We're looking out 30, 40, 50 years, and in the case of these two buildings, 100 years. So we want to create classrooms or learning spaces as flexible as possible. So as you look here, you kind of take the two rooms at the top, there's a sliding glass door in between them. So that door can open, that door can close, where you have an open classroom and you have two classrooms together. And whether that's team teaching or there's lessons where we need to work with small groups of students, so I may take, you know, my class and half of the other one, while that teacher works at a very small group working on specific skills, and you kind of rotate kids through around, and I do a larger project, and we kind of move back and forth. Or however that looks, to have the flexibility to meet the needs of all of our kids and not just traditional four walls anymore. Also, you're going to notice each one of the classroom has ability to open up into the learning commons, so they can open up their classroom, extend and make it more accessible to our student needs. Where some in the classroom, some out of the classroom, and it also helps with supervision or security. You're going to notice there's sight lines to all around that learning pod or that learning area. So these are conversations that we had in core planning. These are conversations we had in each one of our user groups. And as we talked with staff, all of our staff are at a continuum of kind of where they are in this teaching. Some actively embrace this from day one and said, we need to do this now, and how can we're 2 years out, how can we start to incorporate some of these philosophies in our spaces right now, so when we get there 2 years out, we kind of can practice some things and be that much further ahead. Some staff are a little more resistant that says, you know, that they really want their four walls and work, this is my classroom, and that's how they work. So we really need, from a professional development, you kind of hit that on the head. From a professional development standpoint, that's our job here over the next 2 years, is really work with the Anderson staff as well as the Lake Elmo staff. I'll even go a little bit further, and Oakland, as we start to talk about that, there's some of these classrooms that they want to have at their space. As we look at the ALC and how that opened up, that's a different way of teaching. So there's actually these type of spaces in all of our classrooms now, K through 12, as these bond projects finish up. So we need to be intentional. I've had conversations with Stephen Gordy around PD and kind of how do we want to set up and have those conversations now. So once the year starts in the fall of '26, we have schedules that support this type of learning to better meet the needs of all of our kids.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this is a typical classroom, and I imagine there'd be times 6, you know, for pre-K. Will the kindergarten and the 5th grade classrooms be the same, and will those be identified before construction begins?
So I'll answer, are they going to be similar? Yes. Are they identified? We identify them as is. And when when the principal gets into a building, they have right of assignment to different pods or areas. So as we talked in core planning, we talked in user group, you say, here's the kindergarten wing and the 1st grade wing and the 2nd grade and so forth. When the building opens up 5, 6 years from now, if a building wants to switch where the 2nd grade one is and the 3rd grade wing is, they have the flexibility to do that. We just kind of designated those wings through our design of, you know, K1, 2 on the 1st floor for both of them, and then kind of 3, 4, 5 upstairs.
But would there be different designs, knowing it's gonna be a I guess you can't do that if it's gonna switch around. So I'm just trying to think if the kindergarten pod is gonna look the same as the 5th grade pod.
They look very similar. The only different one is pre-K, with some of the needs with our pre-K rooms. Look a little different than the rest of our K through 5.
All right.
Now, we do have, once you get to Lake Elmo, the number I'm not going to dig too far in the weeds, but when you start to look at class size ratios are different for K1 than they are for 4-5. So the number of classrooms for the K1 area is more than the 4-5. So that probably has to be just with class sizes and the number of classrooms there. But in terms of design, they're very similar.
Okay.
So can I go back to the classroom design here? So I'm looking kind of, I don't know what slide I'm on. It's the one with the two green on, yeah. So there's that all, in the top two, there's an all glass wall between those two classrooms. So I'm assuming the sound would be like as if there was a wall, but visually they will be able to see the other classroom. Are we designing these for kind of how the district, I guess, wants to teach? I hope we're not designing classrooms on what one teacher or one specific teaching team want to do, because don't
No,
those
we're
change?
not doing that.
Okay, because that's what I'm just curious, and I wasn't involved in the user groups, and I trust that this has been,
You bring up a great point. So this came up in all of our tours, actually, from the elementary schools and the middle schools as well, is, my kids are gonna be distracted, they're looking across the other way. So as we went to, the first building we went to from our elementary tours was Justice Allen Page in North St. Paul. They have, is it 8, 10 classrooms in a pod?
Yeah.
So we were sitting in a first grade one, and again, they have the glass walls into the learning commons, and so we were just standing in there in the middle and say, okay, let's just take a peek, middle of instruction, middle of the day, 9 o'clock, whatever it was. How many kids even noticed we're there? So you stand and look around and nobody was looking at us. We're standing there and there's glass walls in between, and they were focused on their learning. So that's a conversation that they had, is the kids are gonna be distracted, but once we've went on tours and we're able to visit some of the sites that are currently doing some of these philosophies, they're able to see it in action and really kind of say, okay, this may not be as distracting as we think it is.
okay. But not every classroom will have that
Correct.
wall, so there might be 2 pods where, I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around.
There'll be a wall in every pod like that.
Okay, there will be.
Part of the.
What, okay, so 2 classrooms will share an all-glass wall. Another classroom will just have like a glass door, like the bottom 2 here.
Right.
Okay,
Again, we worked very closely with the core group, which was primarily teachers, to come up with a kit of parts or a Swiss Army knife of how to make it the most flexible.
yeah,
So each one of the pods is very similar, but then each classroom within the pod has slightly different features. And that was at their request. It was to provide options. One of the ways to use this very flexibly is the option to not have teachers occupy one room all the time. So when you want to team teach, there's a room available that can be opened up into double. When you want to do a smaller thing, you can go into one of the more regular sized classrooms. So that was the idea. It very much wasn't around the idea that one teacher wanted a glass wall. It's they all wanted a glass wall, but it didn't make sense to put it in all of them.
okay.
So the idea could be shared, which is another culture to build, whether or not you choose to do that.
Okay.
So what's the purpose of the glass wall? Is it supervision? Because, I mean, if you're separating out the 2 groups of students, you want them to be separate from a instructional standpoint. What does the glass, as opposed to a different, an opaque,
Sure.
what does the glass contribute?
It's actually, it's something we've used in quite a few schools now, and it's really for the technology of the door, more so than the glass. I would imagine that the one between the 2 classrooms will probably have some frosting on it, so that it's not a distraction, but you can still see through there. The doors work incredibly well. So we've all seen schools with the big white wall panels that go.
Yes.
And they're good products and they're designed for a certain purpose. They're very hard to open and close, and so they end up either being opened or closed all the time.
Yep.
So this product, there's a brand called Nano Wall, and we have some options in the specs for bidding, but it's a really robust system. It is quite soundproof. It's as good as a regular insulated sheetrock wall, but it's incredibly easy to operate. Each of the 2 panels basically is a separate piece. So you flip a lever and you can fold it up. You can move one panel out of the way. You can move all the panels out of the way. So it's really that's the reason that it's glass, more so than the actual transparency.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Andrew.
So you kind of mentioned that the glass walls probably would be wanted by most of the teachers, if not all of them. I'm assuming it's just not being done in all the classrooms because of the cost. Is that a
No,
correct statement, or just more flexibility of
It's more
having
than
different
that. It's
spaces?
that, I didn't mean to say every teacher wanted glass.
Okay.
I think the idea is that every teacher might want glass sometimes, but not all the times. So really the goal was to make each room be a little bit different, and maybe I should point out some of the features of them. So they all have a fair amount of glass that goes out into the flex area. So the concept behind that is that you can feel like if you're a teacher in that room, that zone out there is occupiable and
You have pictures
supervisable.
of that later on, don't you?
We do have some, yeah.
So they'll be able to see that.
Yeah. So the idea is that they all can share in that space out there. They can feel comfortable having a couple kids work out there or a parent volunteer and their student. So that's universal in all the classrooms. Then the walls between the classrooms in each ones vary a little bit. So we've been talking a lot about the full glass wall. That technology can open up completely, so you end up with a double-sized classroom. In the other two rooms, you can see that there's a smaller glass panel kind of towards the back, the right side on the axonometric there. And that's just a little glass sliding door. So that can be closed, it can be acoustically separated, but it also provides you another passageway through there. And then they also all have doors, kind of another barn door style glass door that goes out to the flex area. So the idea is you can open and close walls in unique different ways. At any given moment, every pod in the building could have a little bit different configuration. And so that's what we're really trying to build with the flexibility, is that teachers will have the choice to manipulate it. And again, we're recommending these window systems and door systems that are very easy to use. So it's not a call to the custodian to figure out that it's time to open the door. They could do it and spend 10 minutes in that configuration and then decide to change to a different thing. It's really about trying to make the environment flexible for them.
And even to that point, Classroom 4 has some different amenities in it. It has hard surface flooring and some additional casework to support more hands-on learning too. So the classrooms are really designed uniquely to help support the different type of academic goals. Okay. All right, well with that, we will start to kind of revisit some of the concept that we shared last time. So the water and the recreation around the water are pretty big parts to to Bayport. The river in the St. Croix is really part of the bigger watershed, which is where we started from. That watershed is actually larger than the state of New Jersey, just kind of a fun fact. So it really, some of the things that we really started to study and it kind of applied to some of our design is really how the watershed works and really how it starts to weather things, erode, and eventually break down and become deposited somewhere. So with that, we started to look at different images within the St. Croix watershed. So it even starts with some of the dales or the bluffs that are in the upper watershed area, the upper river area up towards Taylor's Falls. And then it starts to work its way down. So even through that, the scales of items start to change. We have the huge forms that are a little bit north. As it works its way down, we have a little bit more boulder-sized things. And then once we actually get to Bayport, you start to really get to the lower watershed or the lower river, and we start to see our sands and our smaller formations. So we're taking this idea of becoming large form, and then eventually it's being eroded, and then it becomes sediment. And how that starts to play out in our design is both through the interior and the exterior. Another thing I'll point out is the photo on the right was taken in Bayport too. So these are local photos. So when we start to apply that to the whole building, we start to include having very tall bluffs, which is kind of around the perimeter of the building. You'll start to see that kind of coffee, darker brown area. That's where our bluffs start to present themselves. And then we have our sediment areas, which is what's left over the deposition from the erosion that has taken place. And really what's causing this erosion is kind of an antagonist that is known as water in our story. And then from the interior, we start to have our tree canopy and really where the vegetation is started and where the watershed begins. And then we start to have our bays as well as our sandbars and bluffs that are sprinkled around throughout the building as well from the internal standpoint. So this is just a little bit of how those materials start to talk about those concepts and that type of language. So we'll have a texturized material to help represent the bluffs. Our water is being very transparent with some glass. And then our sediment is our layers of our brick. So here's an example of how the bluff would start to play itself out in the large forms and starting to be the taller type of forms, very texturized as well. Our water, again, is being transparent, yet kind of the quintessential traditional blue color that you would imagine it to be. It's also showing some motion through it. So the image in the upper right is kind of the window pattern that would show up in some of our large glassy areas to start to represent waterfall and really that motion of water that starts to really create that erosion as part of ultimately getting our sediment. Then here we are with our sediment, which is just layers of different colors of brick that are to represent the different layering of sediment over the years and collection of that.
We should point out that, so that top image is it's a elevation of a brick wall, and there's actually a repeating pattern in there. So that is just used throughout around the building, and you'll see it in the renderings as we go.
So here's our entry, kind of a little bit up in the air, but looking at our main entry of the building. So you start to see the parking lot and the parent drop-off area. The blue canopy, again, is like one of our water points. So we kind of enter the building through our water areas. So that's where the water is. To the right, where we start to see, the right of the flagpole, we start to see the sediment area, which is one of our learning studio wings. And we can start to zoom in a little bit here, and you start to even see some of the cliffs behind that sediment as well. So this is the main entry. On our left would be the administration. To the right of the main entry would be special education. This would be the bus entry. Through these doors, we would have our cafeteria on the left. So you're seeing a little bit of the kitchen area there on the left and some mechanical spaces on the right. Here is our view, kind of, you can see the playground a little bit in that foreground there, but this is the view from the back. Just to the right would also be the outdoor learning classroom as well. The large curtain wall you see there is the cafeteria area. The large bluffs are the gymnasium. And then to the left there, you start to see, again, another wing of the learning studio area. Here is a space that is starting to view the Learning Commons or the Media Center, and also access to the outdoors as kind of part of the sequencing between going to recess and cafeteria from the learning areas.
Is that the cafeteria there, the glass wall?
This one's actually the Learning Commons, but it's very similar to the cafeteria,
Oh,
which is
okay.
on the other side. Yep.
So are there two of those glass
Correct.
curtain walls?
Yes,
Okay.
these are the two of them.
It's just beautiful.
Thank you.
I mean, I have to say, I mean, I was going, wow, this is really something. But all the glass, how safe is it? I mean, talk to me about the glass. I mean, there's,
So, okay, so the glass is, from an economy standpoint, it is double glazed, so there's 2 panes of glass. It's insulated, so it's also thermally broken. It is glass, so there is some transparency. We are tinting it, that's why you start to see some of the blues. So there's some blue tint and also almost like a frosted white glass in there as well. That makes it a little bit more difficult to see through it. And then there's different reflectivity that is placed on the glass as well. Right now, I believe it hasn't been brought up as a concern, so we would probably right now be designing around a lower reflectivity with the glass.
I think, like any, I assume that you're asking about situations where there's shelter in
student
place.
safety.
Yep.
It's important to have daylight in the building. That was a high value of the core groups and the district going forward. So glass is a thing to accomplish that. There are certainly many places in the building that shelter in place is going to be the practice, and we talked about some of the security zones in there. Bigger spaces like the Learning Commons and the cafeteria are probably evacuation spaces. So the district will develop a plan to evacuate students to a nearby room where they can be out of sight. That's fairly common in bigger spaces, especially ones that are semi-open to the inside of the building.
Okay.
And some of those have been even discussed too, that the cafeteria can either go to the gymnasium or it can go to the music an instrumental space. And then even within this media center, there's classrooms that is all within that space as well as all around it that they can go into.
Does any of this glass get like glazed? I know some of our other buildings have glass that has like,
Hardened glass, yeah, security glass is the term we use for it, yeah. So there's certainly strategic points in the building will be hardened with that kind of glass.
okay,
Not every piece of glass in the building, it's quite expensive,
okay.
but the points of highest risk, I think, is what I would call our,
Okay.
that kind of glass.
That's good to know.
I just wanted to say, as you were describing how the design was from the river and all the different components to it, I was like, well, is there gonna have to be like a school interpreter that walks people through and says, here's what this means? You don't need one. It's
Yeah, it
really
really-
impressive. Like, just visually, it really makes sense. So, it's awesome.
Quick comment. I'm also very impressed by the design here, and I'm very much struck by kind of the calming nature of it, that you are incorporating so much nature, and the educational piece in that, and that when kids start to learn about this stuff, it's stuff they'll be like, oh, that's what that wall means. Like, there's just so many layers of thought that goes into this, and I'm just kind of curious: is there elements, like sensory elements, that have gone into the design in terms? I mean, it seems very visual, but then in terms of other things like noise or actual textures, and are there any other sensory pieces that are in the design?
Perhaps when we go through the interiors, I'll make a point to
Okay.
point some of that stuff out.
Great.
Is it appropriate to say hold my beer? I don't think we can say
Yeah.
that. At
Okay, I'm ahead of myself.
We'll
Getting
get to
ahead
the
of myself.
inside.
Okay.
All right. Just another view. So this is kind of a composition that kind of shows all of our elements. We have our cliff language, we have a bit of our waterfall language, and then we have our sediment. So this is just a corner of our learning studios from the outside. All right, so the interiors. So our palette of interiors was also drawn from these same exterior images and really getting a sense through that. So some of the things I'll point out is the blue at the bottom. That is actually a tile that would be used on the wall. You can kind of see some waves going through it. That's actually raised. So that is a tactile item that you can rub your hands along. That's down low, and I'll point that out in the views inside. We have also some other areas of some tackable surfaces that are very soft to touch. I'll just keep pointing them out as we go through.
The wood's a little three-dimensional too.
Yep, and the wood is also three-dimensional, which is that sample on the bottom left. So that's actually really layered pieces of wood too. We have shared these samples with members of the district too, so we've seen some real samples of these items as well. So the image in the middle, some of the carpet that you'll see in our learning commons area is really meant to reflect the water crashing along the shore, taking some of that erosion and those sediments back towards it. So that's actually a carpet pattern that we felt like really mimicked that type of action with the water. And then we'll start getting to the bays and the sandbars and really that calming and relaxing sensation that we feel off to the right. Those are some of the images and colors off to the right. All right, so this is walking into the main entry. So if you remember, our main entry points tend to be more of that waterfall feature. So we've just kind of walked through our waterfall, and that's that's what's guiding us into this space. You start to see some really texturized stone there on the right. So that's another very tactile sensation that we are putting a kind of a visual of we start to have some moments of a cave. So you start to see a little bit of a cave behind it because that's one of the things that happens underwater with a lot of that erosion.
I think I'll also offer one of the things that is really changed dramatically in the last decade with schools is the idea of making them a nice place, an aesthetically pleasing place. And I think it's become clear that there's some component of that of engagement. So designs like this are really meant to spark joy, which makes it a place that people want to be, which seems ironic that we actually have to say out loud, why shouldn't school be a place that kids want to be? So that's the intent of this, and so to sort of delight the senses with some of these things is important. I will also point out that we are featuring sort of the spaces that we're investing some of the district's money in. Not every space looks this sumptuous. But some of them are really important, like when you first come into the school and the impression that you make.
What's the ceiling? What's that
Those
all?
are acoustical panels, so one of your questions about considering acoustical, so those are acoustical panels hanging there.
Quick question. How do you determine which areas are more sumptuous?
They're the areas where most of the students will be, really the shared areas. So obviously we have our cafeteria areas, our learning commons, media center spaces, and then kind of the centralized flexible learning areas that are within the learning studios.
Are the hall-
Again, we have, more vibrant colors and textures and things in the whole building. It's just that a little bit more goes into some of the feature spaces.
Are the hallways, is there anything unique about the hallways, or is that kind of?
Keep going.
Okay,
All right,
thank
so
you.
we start turning to the left and we see a hallway. This is the hallway that starts to go down to the gymnasium. So you see a little peek of the entry area to the gymnasium. Beyond that is the cafeteria. So when you go down this hallway and you turn to the right into the cafeteria, really, if we remember from that floor plan, this is the start of the watershed. So this is where our vegetation is, where the water comes, and where everything starts to grow. So we start to have a little bit of language around trees. Some of that textured wood is showing up here. There's acoustical panels that are helping out the sound and the reverberation from the ceiling, and as well to the left, you can start to see one of those green areas is a little bit more textured. That's also an acoustical area. Our flooring is starting to indicate some of that water that's going through our building and helping direct our flow of students as well. You'll see in the corner there's also a set of doors that's actually immediately outside from the playground too. So again, consideration of that recess eating type of flow. This is our learning commons. So this is where the media center would be. So here's our cliff and our bluff language. So we have a variation of a very texturized stone at the top, as well as a smooth, more polished porcelain tile at the bottom, helping to indicate that that area is the wet area. It's been eroded away from the water going around it. You'll see a little bit on the right side there, that's that blue textural wave tile too. So this feeling that we are within the water and having the bay around us is what this learning commons area is. It's a media center classroom that is down low within that cliff area. Above that cliff, it's the art classroom that's overlooking. Another view of that space. So you start to see, again, how it's really kind of the focal point of the space, and it's really trying to create that presence of the bluff.
What's the material on the art space? Is that granite? What is it granite?
Yep, so
looks-
it is a stone from actually within the watershed area
Oh.
that's being, so it is local to Minnesota. Yep. And then the other side of our learning commons area. So again, it's starting to show some of the action and the ripples of the waves above us in some of our colors. And then again, we kind of talked about that blue datum, or that blue being the water, and all of the tile that's down there. We'll start to work our way towards the learning studio. We have another example of a cave. Just these little moments, it's under a stairwell, some square footage. Let's make a special place for kids. Kids like those type of little corners. So we're starting to put that we're putting that language in there. And then as we walk into the learning studios themselves, this is really the learning studio. So again, some of our inspirational images this is the calming, the bay, the sandbar. So we start to have this feeling of a sunset above us with some of the acoustical clouds or acoustical baffles that are up there. To the left is where the mudroom, locker bays, and bathrooms are. Where you see the person standing there and the little boy raising his hand, that is one of those medium group rooms where people can do some extended learning, or again, have some volunteers or interventionists or specialists come into that area. But this is that middle area between all the classrooms where learning can be flexed into, that has supervision, so that students can be using the space a little bit more independently if chosen, or they can also just be supervised. Here's a view where you start to see the classroom. This happens to be the classroom with the glass operable wall. But again, so that starts to feel a little bit more traditional, where you start to see the desks and, you know, the sink and the casework and the windows that look out into the exterior. Oops. And I think we have one more, right? And then last and not least, our gymnasium.
So Val, go back. So that wall right there, you can see walk into the classroom, but there's a wall there as well.
Yeah, it's a little hard to see in the picture, but that's actually a glass wall system, and it's shown with the doors in the middle being opened. It
So-
won't be that transparent in real life. The computer just makes it look that way.
Yeah.
So then the question I have is for the regular size, not the double classrooms, will they have that same wall?
Very similar, yep.
Yep, yep, they will have this, a similar sized one to this one here, yep. You can even see this classroom has a little bit, the one to the right with the boy in the red shirt, it's a little bit smaller of a glass opening, so all of the openings kind of change too.
Okay.
All right, and that's what we had, any other?
So, I have a question, just in general, when you build these new buildings, are there any design features that you put in that make them easier to maintain, easier to clean? You know, what sort of an impact does this have on janitorial services?
We work closely with Tony in your maintenance department to talk about that. The reality is that to make a building with all these nice things does require some maintenance. So we're working all the time to make sure we have good materials. So that's why we're using things like porcelain tile and stone so that they're easily cleanable. Probably the biggest thing, and we do lots of schools, so we understand what wears out and what looks ratty after a little time. So we're very careful of that while still making it a nice looking school. One of the other trends that has changed in construction is it's actually, we used to build schools mostly out of masonry, concrete block. And the industry has changed such that it's actually hard to do that. There's not crews big enough to build a whole building in the time that we need. So we do a lot more steel frame with sheetrock. But then to protect it, we put tile on the walls, which is actually one of the ways that we're able to get such nice colors and finishes, is that tile comes in a lot of style options. So again, there's a lot of durable materials. I think one of the things we have this conversation with each district that chooses to go down this path is the glass is a thing. Most walls in a school you don't need to clean very often, you know, seasonally, something like that. The glass is something that shows fingerprints, and so that does require a different cleaning schedule. And again, we've worked through that with Mark and Tony, and there'll have to be some accommodation for that going forward.
Okay.
Yes.
That cafeteria with the nice big glass wall, which is on the south side, I just imagine that's great for sunlight coming in, but it could also be bad because of sunlight coming in. So if it's noontime and you're eating lunch, could that just be a bright light that everybody's gonna have to turn their back to if they wanna see, I mean, not be blinded?
Sure. There is tinting in the glass, so we'll modulate that a little bit. And the other thing that we'll do is, in a big system like that, we'll look at different films. There's different films that help reject infrared heat and things like that.
Okay.
So for sure, some people might like to sit there and be warm, and some people might like to sit on the other end of it. So there'll be options within that. I don't foresee it being a sort of an obnoxious problem. with
Maybe it
what we
won't be blinding, that's really what I was getting at.
Yeah, likely not from south facing,
Okay.
yeah.
It'll be bright.
It'll be
think-
bright,
I mean,
yeah, but-
that is part of, again, this delighting the senses thing is if you're a person that likes to be in the bright light, you can go sit on that side. If you want to be in a more shadow, you can go to the other end of the cafeteria, which would be deeper away from that.
Okay.
And I think that's one of the things that makes places nice and interesting is that there's some variety.
So I noticed there are no green spaces on the inside. I mean, considering the winters here.
Green spaces like actual planting? That's true. We don't have any of those planted or planned right now. We could talk about that. We did talk with Tony about a green wall at one point. He wasn't too keen on the maintenance that went with it. But we can bring that up with him and see if we can find some opportunities for that.
Yeah, it'd be great. I mean, because during the winter, the kids will not be able to use the green spaces outside, so.
Sure.
Does the city of Bayport, are they a part of seeing some of these
They
renderings?
saw this last night.
what was their reaction?
I was there for Paul, what were there, 2 hours we were there answering questions?
Something like that, yeah.
Yep.
Were they excited about the design? I mean,
Oh, they thought it was, yeah, they were very impressed with the work that the architects have done. There were other things that were
Okay.
part of the discussion, but, yeah, so the council seemed very supportive.
Okay. It's a very nice facility. So it's beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful too. And just to piggyback on your question, have you then gone back to the core groups and the user groups to show them this and get their feedback to see, yeah, you hit it out of the park in terms of what we wanted? What is the process there?
So that's next step. So you're
That's
the
the
first
next
one to
step.
see it.
Okay.
Once school starts, then I'll go to each of the staff meetings and meet with the staff again and say, okay, here's the conversations where we left off, here's what we came with, get their feedback here the first couple weeks of school. But we wanted to show it here first before we hit the staff when they come back.
I would say the process has been unfolding with them, so not only the core group, but then those user groups, we exposed a lot of people to the design of the building. And then the core group has seen the concept part of it and bought into the idea of building it around the watershed. They just haven't seen the final.
The final pictures, yes. The whole concept has been part of the whole process here from very early on.
So is it still changeable at this point, depending on what sort of feedback you get from those user
Yeah, I mean,
groups?
really, the feedback would be just the renderings that you're gonna see from the outside to the inside. Because the other conversations about the glass wall and all those sorts of things, that was core group and the user groups. And we had 7 meetings with the core group, and we had 2 different rounds of the user group. So each person that was in the facility last year have seen this multiple times in terms of the actual design. What they haven't seen is, what does it look like in tangible, what color are the walls, what color is the carpet, those sorts of things. But they've seen the bubble map, or those first couple, where this classroom is and that classroom is, and what has a glass wall and what doesn't, and they've seen those sorts of images.
And those user groups included community members and.
The core
and
planning
staff.
did, the user group was really specific to those areas. So the special ed areas, we brought the special education teachers in. The music room, we brought all music teachers around the district. Same thing with Phi-Ed, same thing with art, same thing with media, because they move around. So it wasn't just that person there at that specific time. We brought in the specialist district-wide. When we looked at classrooms, we had, each grade level, a kindergarten meeting, a first grade meeting, a second grade meeting, and so forth. So we really incorporated everybody in the building that works in those spaces to give their input in terms of things they like and things they'd like us to consider moving forward.
Did we see the playground for the kids?
The playground's not fully designed. We do have a image from the outside where it is scheduled to go, so.
The playground's
Start
kind of
to
a
see it
different
right
phase.
there.
So
Yeah.
we have just a stock photo of it. That's not the actual
Right.
playground. There'll be another phase where actually specifically, the furniture that you see in there too has not been discussed yet. That's the next phase. This is really just the walls, the carpet, the ceilings. The next conversations we have is around furniture, around playground, some of those things.
And then this obviously incorporates, I saw soft play, so that's an inclusive play space for all
So
kiddos.
soft play is really playground surface. Hard play is blacktop.
So like
Basketball
this- the
courts,
synthetic
foursquare,
rubber, okay.
hopscotch. Correct, yes, we will use
And that's
that.
happening district-wide. It seemed like that's an initiative. Cool, good.
That was the 2015 bond, was to take the wood chips out and replace those with that rubberized surface.
It's really going to look this way.
Fingers crossed. Yeah,
A
yeah.
little bit better. It'll be a little bit more realistic.
That kind of goes to my question too. I'm hoping that with all of your experience in doing other schools, that you've gone through the bidding process with those, and you're pretty confident that all these beautiful things that we just saw will be within the budget, or at least close in the budget.
That is yeah, that's great. We hope so. We've done already 2 rounds of estimates between, as the process that Mark described before. So we have one more of those to do, which is an estimating process. We'll, of course, make any adjustments we think we need there. The other thing that is going on that is putting a little pressure on the budget, or may put pressure on the budget, is this regulatory approvals by the cities. So there's road improvements and things, and sewer improvements that need to be made. So we have to balance all of that. We will get it in our best guess of being on budget before I go out to bid. And then we'll all cross our fingers and hope that that works out. So we do have a very good track record. Both Kraus Anderson and we'll bid hundreds of projects actually each year. So we have high confidence we'll make it, but we can't give you a guarantee. What we can guarantee is that we will get you through it, and if adjustments need to be made to get it on budget, we'll do all of those things. So, that was a long way of saying we have a high confidence that we're on track, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay, great, thanks.
And then kind of piggyback on that question, in terms of getting, you mentioned kind of about working with different government bodies. So sidewalks, is that school district, is that city, is that state? I mean, is that just a whole mix of?
State is not in the mix.
Okay.
Generally, when you go to develop a site like this, most cities and counties look at you as a developer. And probably most people don't understand that cities are not actually built by cities, they're built by developers piece by piece. So there's a whole process where the city planning department asks for things, infrastructure improvements, and they're doing the same thing with you. At Bayport, obviously we're sort of connected to the park. We're actually doing improvements in their park. They have not asked for a great deal of other sidewalks, but again, we're just starting that process. I think there the biggest debate is whether the sidewalk continues down Fifth Avenue a ways. They have not asked you to fund that yet, but you might have seen on our site plan, we have the beginning of it shown on the plan. So to be continued, I don't think Bayport's gonna have a lot of extra infrastructure that needs to be built.
All right.
So this is Bayport. We'll go into Lake Elmo next. You're going to see some things that are very similar, but some things that are unique as well. So not the same school, but there are some things that are going to be transferable between the two.
Well, I'll go a little bit quicker. Please feel free to ask questions and slow me down if you like to focus on things. Obviously, you know the school programs. This building is quite a bit bigger, 1,100 student capacity, and nearly 150,000 square feet. We are on a very similar schedule, however, and the intent is to have the building open for the fall of 2026 school year. The two core groups, as you remember, were run completely independently. There were some things that naturally were common between the two. There was a little bit of cross-pollination. We shared good ideas between the two and those kinds of things. So some of the design principles that we were highlighting there are the idea of having bright and transparent spaces and to invite nature into the building. That was a theme there as well. The proximity to the nature center, or the regional park, I should say, is, I think, a real asset. A big focus in this building on the idea that it'd be a place where students can call it their own. So a focus on student attention in the building and making it a place that they feel engaged in. The idea that we would reflect the community in the building, so Lake Elmo has its own identity as a city, so we've done some of that. You'll see that coming up. Fun and engaging is similar to what we talked about in the other one, but this group again brought that into the mix. And that focus on nature, and then again, the idea that we be flexible and adaptable. So you'll see that is one of the parts where we cross-pollinated between the groups a little bit, so they're very similar educational environments, even though they're in a different size and configuration in the building. So. Again, we have what we call a site forces diagram. This shows the site. There's a lot of things going on here. I won't go into great detail, but working with the city and the county on access off of the roads is still current events. There's a lot of constraints that go with that, and there's some improvements that I think they're going to be asking us to participate in some way. And then there's a lot of topography on the site that's really interesting. Essentially, you'll see in the next one, the building is kind of in the center right of the plan, and it's really strategically placed there because that's a kind of a plateau or a high spot in the building, in the site. And then there's really interesting things on the lower left, that basin, it's labeled basin on the lower left. It's actually a lake that's not a lake. It's a little bit of a mystery because it doesn't have an overflow, but it doesn't hold water. So it must percolate a lot of water in there. And so some of those things are actually creating places that we have to do special things with the watershed to make sure we take care of those. So there will be a lot of great nature areas left on the site when we're done too. And here's the site plan as it stands today. The primary entrance would be off of 10th Street on the south there. There are requirements by the county to stay away from the intersections by a certain amount so that we don't have traffic things happening at the busy intersection. So that's why the two drives extend out to the corners of the site. It also conveniently provides maximum stacking space for parents. So there's a lot of space before you get to the front door. The intent is to kind of wind them around the parking lot and create space there. Then we have the main parking lot in the front. There is an interconnect on the right side, but we don't anticipate that being open. It'll probably be gated for most of the day, so you can get access, but it's not meant as a pass-through. Then the receiving area, and then you can see the separate bus loop up on the north side of the site. This is one of the current events with the county, is whether or not we get a full access off of Lake Elmo Avenue. If we're not able to get that from them, that might change the site plan a little bit, because we'd have to figure out how to get the buses connected to the other main entry. Staying up, kind of going counterclockwise, we have the hard surface and soft surface play at the back of the building. And then we're anticipating the play fields kind of going north and west off of the building there. The floor plan.
Can you just go back? Sorry, I
certainly.
just had a couple of questions. So the entrance from 10th Street, is that going to require a special lanes there? Do we know yet? Is that part of your discussion upcoming?
We're working on it. We just received a draft of the traffic study, and that recommends improvements at that driveway. It is yet to be determined exactly what that will be. It could be as a roundabout would be the high side of things. Certainly turn lanes would be recommended as part of that.
Okay. And
And may-
then, sorry.
May require a traffic signal if it's not a roundabout.
Oh, okay. And then it sounds like you're going to plant trees as a sound barrier. Can you talk a little bit more about that? As a sound barrier for the gun club?
They're existing trees.
There is existing trees that are out there that are part of the landscape. We will be planting new trees. We are also working on the sound study, and you've incorporated a sound consultant, environmental sound consultant into the team. And we don't have their advice yet about what to do. So that might be a mitigation. It might not be necessary. I guess to explain that, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, they had sensors out on the site for about a week during one of the gun club's events. I think their biggest event of the year, or the most activity during the year. They are taking that data and they're creating a computer model that helps predict sound penetration into the site, and then we'll get some answers to that.
I see.
And the new trees are part of the tree replacement ordinance that the city of Lake Elmo has.
Got it, okay.
Yep.
All right, okay, thank you.
All right, then proceeding into the plan, you'll see that the plan is not dissimilar from Bayport in terms of its major organization. On the right side, we have kind of the public spaces. We have that same idea that you can lock that part of the building down at night or on the weekend to use the gym and cafeteria. So on this plan, the main entry is on the south, on the bottom of the drawing. That orange area to the left is the main office, and so that will contain the secure vestibule. During the school day, student or visitors will be forced into the office and screened before being allowed into the building. As we proceed to the right, we have the gym, in this case with the larger size school and the need for Phi-Ed delivery. It's a 2-station gym, so this is about twice the size of the one at Bayport. The gray is the receiving boiler area and kitchen, and then again the purple, all the colors are the same as the Bayport plan. It's a cafeteria, and that one has a nice view out the back of the building there. As we go back to the front door, I guess we didn't point out music. Music in this is there's one on each floor in this building too. So as we go back to the front door, we go in and go to the left. Again, we walk into the learning commons. Here, it's not quite in the center of the building. It's sort of in the corner there so it has its own windows that look outside there. That's shown in the light blue. And then there is 3 pods on each floor, but they are roughly double the size of the ones at Bayport. One of the really unique parts of the design that we worked on with the program is they identified, as you know, they are kind of half immersion, half regular ed there, and they anticipate becoming in balance. So we really have 4 classrooms for each side of that. And it was very important for them to be co-located. So first grade of immersion and English are in the same pod. But with their help, we were able to create this design where they're sort of offset from each other. So they have their own little sub-community within the community. So first grade's a community, but then they each have sort of their half of that. And I think another great thing that came out of it is there's that one room that we labeled darker green. That's sort of a common room, and we're outfitting that more like a lab, as Val pointed out before. So that has a little bit more casework access to water and hard surface floor so that they all can use that as sort of a craft area or a project-based learning area. And then each of the pods has that same feature. All right, then this building also has a mix of special ed. So part of the special ed is dispersed in the building, and you can see the orange areas in each of the pods, just like we saw at Bayport. There is also a center-based program, which is co-located or located right adjacent to the office at the bottom there. Then when we go upstairs, the plan again repeats. The left side is a two-story plan, and then we have the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade areas up there. There's also, in the core there, sort of at the center, is the art and music rooms are located sort of central to everybody on that floor. Then zooming into the pod configuration that I talked about, you can see that there's 3 sort of main classrooms that are in a block, and those blocks repeat themselves. So the 2 sides have similar features. There's one room that can be turned into a double classroom, as we talked about before, and then one room that has access just to the main area. And then in the corner, you can see there's a little glass wall that connects those. So the 3 rooms can work together as 3 rooms, sort of as, again, a kit of parts, or they can all be divided into separate rooms so that you have a more traditional classroom setup. Because of the what Mark was talking about with the number of sections per grade, some of the studios have another classroom, and that's labeled Classroom 8 on this plan up in the corner, so that varies depending on what grade you're in. Then a lot of the same feature, there's a professional staff office, there's the mudroom, there's the toilet rooms, and small group rooms, and calming rooms.
So Paul or Mark, talk about the staff office and how that impacts staff in rooms and the philosophy behind that.
Yep. And so as we design these, and you saw it with the bridge transition, you saw it with the ALC, very similar here is these aren't, room 1 is Mrs. Jones and room 2 is so-and-so and room 3. This is this is 1st grade or this is 5th grade, or you pick the grade that it is. And the staff has their office, so the office out of the staff room, it's just each room isn't their own. And so depending on what they're doing, if they're in a reading lesson and they want more quiet space, they go to maybe the room that has 3 of the walls there, not the one with the sliding room. If they have a science or a social studies project where they're have a larger group or kind of more bigger activity, they can go to some of those larger spaces. So this is really learning space for the entire grade level. And this is what I kind of talked about before with the PD, or creating schedules in terms of how that instruction looks here over the next couple years. So when we go into these new spaces, we kind of have that philosophy down. But the thought is teachers don't own their own rooms. The whole community owns the whole space. And so they use different rooms depending on kind of what lesson or what they're doing. And there's a couple different philosophies about how to structure that from a schedule perspective. And those are things that we're going to talk through. We've started to talk with the staff. I've kind of laid out a couple different areas and philosophies, which way we could go. Now we're going to start to say, okay, we've talked and kind of brainstorm which one we want to pick and kind of narrow down. So once we get more of that information, we can bring that back to you with more concrete details.
That way of thinking is what allows some things to happen, as we talked about with Bayport, that the rooms can be differentiated. It also is what allows them to have a room that's more geared to be a lab. That room is somebody's homeroom. It's a capacity room. So for morning meetings, somebody's going to be in that room, but they don't have to have the room with the hard surface floor where everybody else has carpet, except for that, when you need to have everybody in a room.
And this is absolutely not about the design, so I don't want to deviate from the design of the building, but I'm just thinking to myself, like, we know transitions with kids are hard, so I'm just trying to visualize, having never seen something like this function. If you start out morning meeting in one room and you want to go to science in another room, is that a point of transition that will be that the district is going to, we spend a lot of time talking about in other aspects how we want to minimize some of that hallway transition time. And so I don't know how often these rooms will be switched.
So that's a great question. So that changes by grade level.
Okay.
So K1, we're probably talking beginning of the year, classroom 1 is my room, classroom 2 is his room, classroom 3 and so forth. So you kind of come in, you have your space and the year goes. So as the younger kids, you have your more traditional space. As the year goes, you start to look and kind of flex and move around a little bit. As you get older, 3rd, 4th, 5th, you can do that more easily and more quickly, but also there's a lot of departmentalization happening in third, fourth, and fifth grade as kids are moving around already in terms of if there's 3 fourth grade teachers, I do math, he does reading, she does science, social studies, whatever that looks like, there's already that moving around. The other part of transitions that was very intentional in here is the use of the learning commons as well as the use of the small group and medium group spaces. So as we look as our interventionists currently in a lot of our schools, our kids leave their classroom, walk down the hall, go to a speech classroom, go to a special ed classroom, go to intervention, go to here, there, and wherever. The philosophy here is the kids stay in the commons. This is their home, this is their house, this is their living room. The staff comes to them. So when it's their speech or when it's their intervention, kids aren't leaving, staff comes to them. And they can work in the learning commons, they can work in the medium-sized group room, in the small group room, kind of depending on the size. There's spaces in there, so we come to the kids to minimize those transitions that you just talked about.
And they'll still have that, because I know you talk a lot about that dignity, that piece. There, and we talk a lot about open glass and all that. They'll still be, if they're getting services, if they're getting interventions, they'll have that privacy built into these.
Correct.
Okay.
Because the way it is right now, the only people that go into these areas are kids that need to go into these areas. Right now in the hallway, there's kids going to lunch, there's kids going to FIAD, there's kids going to music, and you have kids of all grade levels walking through the hallway as kids are getting their services. Here, everybody's there. And in the learning commons, it's just not gonna be somebody working with a parent volunteer or somewhere there. There's gonna be kids there working on a whole bunch of different things, and it's not gonna be, it's just gonna be what kids need.
And Director Sherman, I want to honor your question because this is actually a big topic during core group, was the transitions and having students work their way from one area to another area. One of the goals is that this really feels like this entire learning studio that we're calling it really feels like a classroom. The entire space is their learning area, and they're just, if you want to call it stations, moving from this station to that station. And it's supposed to be less of a transition, less of a feeling versus what they are going through now between Lake Elmo and Anderson of actively going down a hallway, perhaps crossing a classroom or two that is going to lunch or to FIAD and stuff like that. That this is really their whole neighborhood and their whole experience is this bigger space.
Great.
But
Thank you for that.
The reality is, I think that you teach them all of those things.
Yeah.
And that this could offer a more natural way to exist. I think the idea that the teachers are a family, and it's not about my kids and your kids, it's about our kids, is a different philosophy. And I do want to emphasize that this is meant to be flexible. It has a lot of different options. Some of these things are what you're going to be exploring over the next few years, but in the subsequent years, it can be something different. One of the choices that was made in your district is all of the classrooms have 4 walls and doors. So there's no reason you couldn't teach in a traditional format in this building if that's what you decide in the future to do. So it's really meant to be flexible.
I think you might have answered my question, because I think currently a teacher has their classroom, they do what they want with it. Now, if you have 7 or 8 teachers in this space, who's in charge of it? Of those 7 or 8, is there a team lead? Or, that's not your question maybe, but I'm
It's a
just
building
looking
level
forward.
discussion.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll just also offer that this is not brand new. It's a fairly new concept. It has roots going back decades, but there's been several other districts in Minnesota that have done similar things, and that is part of what got your teachers to be comfortable with this, is going and visiting some of the other schools that are operating in this format. All right, should we delve into the concept a little bit? I think you've seen some of these slides last time, so again, I'll go over them pretty quick, but we did sort of dive deep into the history of Lake Elmo and understand some of its history as a resort town. Fascinating that it was a major creamery for a long time and would ship dairy products into the Twin Cities. It also interesting that that was a fairly short part of its history. It was only about a decade when it was a resort community, until the railroad went past it out to the St. Croix, and people didn't stop there as much anymore, apparently. So, but it's got a fascinating and deep history. Our concept really gravitated towards the idea of nature. Again, that was part of the direction of the core group. And with the adjacent park reserve there, we've really picked up on the idea of the prairie landscape as the theme for the building. And you can see some of the great elements that come with that. There's some trees in the distance, there's the grasses, and there's the flowers, there's the sky, all of those things. And got really excited about the idea of kids occupying that space. And so this slide and a few others have been really pivotal in helping to develop the idea that kids within the scale of the prairie, they sort of exist within it on some points. And so we're really playing that up in the design of the building. Again, some more shots, trails, grasses, trees, and all the wonderful colors and textures that come with that. And this slide talks about some of the components that we incorporated into the design. So we have the sky, trying to figure out or play up and make present the horizon, the clouds and the textures that provides over the occupants, the horizon line and the grass plants, students, and then some of the animals and flowers also have played into the design. So you can see, again, just more inspirational images that we found of all the different wonderful colors and shapes that you can see in the prairie. And then this is a similar diagram that shows you kind of how we're applying some of those concepts within the building. So in this case, the whole building is kind of the prairie. We have trees, which are sort of the brown circles. There's places where we feature sort of an element that provides some contrast to the prairie in wooded elements. And then trails and grasses, as you can see in the through the middle with the arrows. And then we also bring in some of the sky. So the cafeteria has quite a dramatic cloud theme to it as well. And then some accents. Each of the pods has sort of different insects and flowers that they're themed around. Again, a similar shot that shows some of the exterior materials that we're contemplating. On the exterior of the building, we're also proposing the use of some colored glass to give it just a pop of color. Again, some of those wonderful flowers and insect colors that happen in the prairie. And here's a sample elevation of that building. So again, you can see that we're using a rich brick texture to play that up. And then throughout the building, we do things where we're sort of supersize things. So those white elements on the building are meant to be supersized blades of grass that sit in the foreground, and then the brick pattern is sort of the receding horizon line in the background. Here's an example of, this is the front entry canopy. So the idea is that we've taken a tree basically and scaled it up and burrowed a hole in it. So we're using lighting elements, colors, and textures to help it feel like you're walking in through underneath the tree as you go in. And that actually will be metal panel again. It's a durable, long-term material. It doesn't require much maintenance. This is an example of how we're doing some of the taller volumes. So this is an elevation of the gymnasium. And I don't know if we mentioned it at Bayport, but both of the buildings will have a tornado shelter. That is part of the Minnesota State Building Code now, so the gyms will be that. It is convenient to build those out of precast concrete. It's a great material for that. And we're able to mold things into the precast concrete. So we're proposing that we mold in kind of these cloud shapes throughout there. So it's really meant to be the sky with clouds. The middle, it's a little hard to see, but the middle picture in the top there is an example of a computer rendering of what it would look like. So in the elevation, it looks pretty like dark lines, but it's really a much more subtle texture on the elevation. And then this steps back and looks at the main entry. So on the left side, you can see the prairie views, and on the right side, you can see that open sky area. And in the center is that main entry, the tree-shaped piece. Then we're also taking that tree material and we put it on sort of strategic points on the outside of the building. So that end classroom on the pod also gets those materials to accent it. Then as we go around the building, this is one of the classroom wing on either side. Another view of that main entry with some of the landscaping that we would like to do out front. Another view, this one's of actually the back side, so that's the recess door. Another view of another side of the building there. And then this is the current corner by the Learning Commons or the Media Center. Then stepping inside, again, we're seeking inspiration from the nature of the prairie. We've got some great colors again. Part of the idea is to immerse students and kids in the experience. So a lot of rich, vibrant colors that surround them at certain points and also sort of releases into sky and more open spaces as we go. Some of the fun things I'll point out, we have the carpet on the left side, which is used to texture the ground. In the middle is actually wallpaper. It's like kind of a supersized wallpaper of, I think that they're probably fern fronds, something like that. And then some of that same kind of wood paneling that we talked about before that has some tactile qualities to it. So this is the view. We've just walked in through the front door, and we have this fun kind of seating gathering area here. And then to the left, we go into the cafeteria on that side, right? That's the cafeteria.
Learning Commons.
Learning Commons on that side, sorry. That's the door, that's the security door that separates the two sides. This is a view in that Learning Commons or Media Center. So again, trying to immerse kids in the environment. We have lots of applique pieces that we're putting on the wall. A lot of this is paint, by the way, like the green hills and things are paint. The green down below is a tile to help protect the wall. And then there's some things, they're not rendered quite literally, but those red shapes on the ceiling are actually a tree, kind of a tree sculpture thing that is just an off-the-shelf product that you can buy to hang up there. Another view looking the other way. So again, we also introduced some of the elements of the tree. So this has a corner where you can go through the cutout in the tree and have a little reading nook inside there. And then this is the cafeteria space. So this is the sky space, meant to feel like you're in a meadow looking up at the sky. And we're looking back at that seating area that we talked about before.
May I point out something to Director Lauer? You mentioned being able to learn what the building's about. You can even see here, there's some images where we're actually kind of treating it as an interpretive area, that we start giving some facts around a monarch butterfly next to that butterfly image and even some of the flowers, to start experiencing some of the learning around a prairie within it.
And then we've chosen color and animal and plant inspiration for each of the pods. So that plays out in the theme across the building. Here's one of the pods. So again, a little bit more subdued environment in here, but still rich. And one of the features we're talking about is that ceiling element there that changes. So this one is a flower, and that's made again out of off-the-shelf sort of acoustic elements that we would have them cut into that shape and hung up there. And this one you can see the flower and the stem coming at us here. Then you can see the classroom environment around it, very similar to what you saw at Bayport, but a very different color palette to give it a whole different feel. And then this would be the butterflies, so you can see the butterfly sculpture up at the top, but again, the layout between the pods is very similar. And then another view of one of those classrooms with that wall open in the middle. So that's what a double classroom could look like. As Mark pointed out, the furniture is all placeholder furniture. That's a future decision, exactly how you'll do that. And that shows the wall being closed. And then a shot of the gym here. So we're using some acoustic elements on the walls to help bring some of that theme in there. This is a double gym, by the way, too, so that it will have an operable wall that closes down in the middle.
How many courts does this have then?
It's 2 regulation basketball
Two
courts.
regulation.
And then a lot of striping to allow different FIAD activities to happen.
You see that brown or kind of peach stripe down the middle? That's kind of the door that would separate the 2 gyms. So Anderson has 1 gym the size of Lake Elmo has 2, so it's 2 sides of Lake Elmo.
Where's the pickleball stripe?
Is it the white one? or
That's
is
on
it
there,
the-
actually.
Yeah.
It is.
Everywhere. The answer is
It is.
everywhere.
That's the light blue.
All right, that was the end of that.
I have a quick question. I don't see any skylight here.
I don't think we have any skylights shown. We have a large amount of windows in the building to bring daylight in all around. Part of the, if I go all the way back to the plan, part of the reason the plan is got wings on it is that it allows more access to daylight from the walls. Skylights are a fairly expensive proposition, and I I know a facilities guy from a long time ago that said there's two kinds of skylights, one that leaks and one that's gonna leak. They typically are a bit of a maintenance problem, so we don't tend to do them unless we really need them to light a space. And I think in the case of both buildings, we've got pretty good access to daylight all around the building.
I mean, I mean, it's great. It's great. Just looking at the colors as well. I don't know about all of you, but it just kind of feels a bit dull for me. The colors.
Okay.
So,
In which spaces? The classrooms are a little bit more neutral than the central part? Is that what you're reacting to?
all of them, all the colors.
Okay.
I mean, it's just the combination, the building is great. It's just the combination of the colors. I mean, you can see all of us staring at Lake Elmo. It's got great, interiors and all that, but it's, I don't know, the colors for me, there's something, I'm thinking of the kids, when they walk into the building, it's beautiful, but what is that thing that really catches their eye? I just feel something is missing.
Okay, we'll take a look at that.
Are you talking specifically Lake Elmo?
Yeah,
Yep.
Lake Elmo specifically. And it's got a lot of walls too. And so that's the reason why I asked about this kind of light coming in. It feels a bit dark. I'm just talking about it from the picture that's shown. I'm not sure. Maybe it's,
Okay.
it's a bit different, but the colors don't help as well. That's my perspective.
Okay, we'll take a look at that.
I really love the outside and the vertical elements that you have, which I know you're thinking of them as blades of grass or, wheat or whatever. They look like birch trees to me in this rendering, but I'm sure that, by the time I see it in person, it's gonna look more, but I just love the verticality of that. I just think it's just a brilliant design element. I love how interesting it is. I think that this is just a beautiful design. The color scheme does not, I think that what we're missing in this color scheme is the blue of the water.
Yeah.
And so perhaps it just, and these are intended to be more earth tones, right? Because that's essentially where you're getting the inspiration from. I'm not bothered by it. I just think the spaces are so inviting. You've got some purple in here, actually it's more like lilac. But I think there are some bright colors in here. So it doesn't bother. I think it's consistent. I think the whole design is consistent, the color scheme and, everything that you've done on the outside. I think it's beautiful. Good job.
Going on the color thing, I'm trying to analyze, what are you feeling with this, Annie, or not? I'm not necessarily getting the same vibe of, I like it, but I'm also noticing the Bayview pictures seem to have more contrast in the colors, they're just more difference between darks and lights, and this one's more pastel-y, just in general, but it's very calming to me, so I don't mind it. But my question was, the Lake Elmo building definitely seems to have a lot of pretty decorative parts, like the flower on the ceiling and the appliques on the walls. How much of those, and I think you alluded to it a little bit with at least that flower being acoustic, but how much of those are purely atmospheric versus doubling as another functional element?
I would say in this building, there's certainly some that are functional, like the steps for kids to sit on and things like that. But the flowers on the walls and things are really decorative.
Okay.
They can be interpretive too, but they're not performing some particular function.
Okay, with the flower, you had mentioned that they were made out of the
Yeah, yep,
acoustics?
yep.
At the ceiling.
So,
yeah.
okay.
And
But not
there's
on the
lighting
walls.
incorporated into those too,
Okay.
so there are those kinds of things. But
Okay, I guess that was more the functional piece of, is it doing something other than just being pretty?
Sure, yeah, I'm thinking of in the Learning Commons, most of that is decorative. And there's some lighting up there, but most of it is applied.
Okay.
And then I know the programming here is the medically fragile. Is there anything different or unique being done in that area? Obviously, it's just driven by medical need, I'm assuming, and, complex and more advanced nursing. Is there anything to highlight in that, or?
It has been designed really, I would say, with a lot of input. Customized might be too strong a word, but definitely they have a special group of needs that where the building needs to respond uniquely to them. So we've been working with that. It was actually really important to the group that, to the core group, that they felt like a kind of a pod in a way too, and then it wasn't just a wing in a building. So they're actually identified as their own color in that color scheme image, where they're a blue. So that they have their own flower as well being represented in their space too. So they will have a flower element in their ceiling as well, just so that they feel like the other learning studios do.
Yeah, great. Any other comments?
What is the unique, I know the other one has the caves, that place where the kids can just go. There's an attractive feature there, and, most kids like that. But what is unique here that kids can also have, like the other school had? What is that
Yeah, I think the
thing?
two big feature elements are, you can see them in the foreground of this slide. There's these seating elements, they're called learning stairs in some settings. And then in the background there, you can see with the tree elements, we often have a cutout in the tree that you can go into.
It's kind of like a habitat hole. I think there's another one, a couple back. So even there, you can start to see a couple of them. Just kind of, and then with the inspirational image on the left of the squirrel peeking its head out through the tree trunk, kind of like that type of a wildlife space too.
And I missed this up front. Is there an outdoor learning area in this? There is, okay.
Yeah, do you want me to flip to? Sure, go ahead. Whoops. There we go. So it's
Well,
immediately
that will be-
outside of the
Okay,
learning
so that is
commons.
designed to be the outside,
Yep,
okay.
yep. Right outside of the media center space.
Okay. Yes.
So yeah, I think both designs are beautiful, and it's been a really great way of incorporating the different landscapes into the various communities. I think, Director Perbeni, I think what maybe caught my eye with the Bayport School versus Lake Elmo is probably the windows, was it had all the blue integration, which gets a nice little pop, both inside and outside, whereas this, with the one picture you're at, we were looking in, you had like a high white wall, and you had like a glass, so it just kind of seemed a little bit more mundane than maybe the blue did. But also just probably I'm assuming also with the Bayport, if I remember, you walk in and it's, high ceilings because you're only using half of the second floor, whereas from a size, we have to use both the first and second floor entirely, so you lose some of that high ceilings, is that kind of a accurate way of this? It just kind of stood out to me of what was a big difference of, as we did kind of the visual walkthrough through the pictures.
Yeah, I think we could get that same height at Lake Elmo. Again, sometimes the renderings don't show the whole story there, but if that's a concern, I think we could figure out how to make it feel more similar that way.
Yeah, and I would say a concern. I mean, again, it's beautiful, but just looking at what really stood out to me in some of the different pictures. But yeah, overall, like I said, well done, so thank you.
And are those colored accent windows, are those consistent all the way around the building?
Correct, yep. So all of the classrooms have a little pop of colored glass.
They're a little hard to see from the outside. From the inside, they look quite brilliant.
Any other questions or comments? And as we process this, we can provide feedback to both Mark and Mike. If after sitting on it, you have any additional thoughts? Great. Thank you so much. This is
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so
It's
much.
fun to show you.
It's very exciting.
Thanks.
It almost starts to feel real.
I know. I mean, it's so exciting. Yeah. Great. I'm assuming there's no other questions for Mark, and if not, we're going to move on to our next, which is our transportation update. We'll turn it over to you again.
All right. Good evening. So it's that time of the year, we're getting ready for the start of next school year, so I just want to provide you kind of where we're at transportation-wise. I know once school starts, typical to last year, we'll do a kind of summer construction update. So here we just want to chat a little bit about transportation. So as you recall, last spring, we had a priority-based budgeting conversation where we looked at a lot of aspects of our school system and made reductions in different ones. One of the areas was transportation, where it's decided we'd make reductions in two areas. One is to create hub transportation for our GATE students, as well as moving to a 2-mile boundary for our secondary students while taking in considerations for our hazardous roads. As we move forward with implementing that, our transportation department is moving to a new routing software. So typically, we've used Versatrans for the last 20-plus years. It's an older platform, an older system, so we're moving over to Traversa, which is a newer kind of 20th century platform, which integrates our routing software with our student information system, PowerSchool. Last spring and into the summer, we've had some issues in terms of importing some of the data from our student information system into Traversa. So we've been working very diligently this summer to make sure that those nightly data pulls from our student information system over to our transportation system are working smoothly. So I know we briefly talked about the changes last spring with our priority-based budget conversations. We originally had planned to get that information to those impacted families out in mid-July. Unfortunately, because of some of the issues we've had with our imports, we didn't get that information out until last week. So last week, we were able to connect with all the families. There's about 200 families impacted, about 100 with both each at the middle school and at the secondary or at the high school level. So about 200 families for that 2-mile walk zone that we were able to connect with last week. So the good news is we're starting to mitigate those issues and getting the daily imports running smoothly, so this shouldn't affect our routing process come the fall. We're planning to send routing information to families on Friday, August 16th, which is typically what we do. Now, as a board, you're probably gonna go, wait a second, school's starting in a week, that's really late. We intentionally do it as late as possible. The reason we do it as late as possible is because we want to get the most accurate information to our families as we can. So we could send information out now, but in August, especially beginning August, is a busy enrollment time. So as people enroll and they need transportation, if somebody enrolls and there's not a stop originally kind of where they live, we have to add a stop. If that person that we add is stop number 2, we just affected every stop after that. So we could have told you your pickup time was 8:15, but someone just enrolled 3 days later, their stop 2, now your 8:15 stop now becomes 8:22 or whatever that looks like. So we want to wait till as late in the year as possible, still giving families time to, adjust to whatever their bus schedules are. But typically we send it the week before school starts. So we'll send it out Friday, August 16th. School doesn't start for secondary until that following Monday, August 26th. And then elementary actually doesn't start till after Labor Day, so there's a couple-week gap in between that. So they'll get their information at that point, and then they can contact the transportation department if they have a change of address or something comes up with the information that we send out. So just want to kind of update you where we are from our perspective and open it up to any questions or comments that you may have. Yeah.
Sure. Versatrans to Traversa. So last year, parents could log into some system and see where their bus is at and then just go out when the bus is gonna be there. I sense that a lot of people didn't use that, but will that system still be similar in Traversa? And can we get people to use it?
Yep, that's part of the instructions. We send all that information next week. That's part of it, is how to log into that app for it's a different app than Versatrans had one. It's a different app, but there will be login information for them to do the exact thing you're talking about. Is their pickup time is whatever it is, but they can see where the bus is, so they know where their kid needs to go out to the bus stop.
Just to add to that, the reason is I think they might get that information at the beginning of the year. Their bus is on time, but then substitute driver, whatever, things change. And now their bus might be 5 minutes late, but they haven't been reminding themselves to check that bus when it's coming. And I think if we could remind them throughout the year somehow, hey, just remember, use this system, follow your bus.
We can follow
Especially
up,
in the winter.
Yeah, we can follow up with our school newsletters and just keep that information out for the first couple months to make sure families get logged in.
We
Absolutely.
generally do that, especially as it comes into winter time. We send out reminders letting people know that.
Okay, thanks.
Director Lauer?
I guess piggybacking off that, I guess I have two things along those lines, because I felt like last year, my then 9th grader was hopping on the bus, and the pickup time changed several times. 10 times, maybe over the course, from the beginning until whenever at some point, I think it evened out. But it wasn't just, the first 2 weeks. It was the first couple of months. And we weren't in the habit of looking, right? So it was like, well, your pickup time is 7:05. Okay, great. And so then it was, well, I think it was never really, I think he missed it once because it moved and he didn't look. And so I guess what we were like, well, it would have been nice if there was maybe a way to go, bing, your time changed. An email goes out saying, hey, you're impacted.
That's part of this new software that we're trying to do, is to be able to, as we change that, to get that notification here. That's next step to what you're talking about, time changes, automatic email goes out to the families to say, you got moved from 8:19 to 8:22 or whatever it is gonna be, to keep that up front. So, hopefully that'll be a lot smoother this year. The plan is,
So,
that-
let me talk to this, all right? So, last year, start of the school year, for a number of our families in this district, it was an unmitigated disaster. Okay, that's bottom line, all right? So what was going on is, we were trying to route, and because of the antiquated system we were using, we would update it, and it would update it like midnight, and families would not be told, they couldn't be told because of the system we were using, that changes were happening. And so they'd show up and get their kid out for the bus stop, and the bus would either be 10 minutes early or 10 minutes late, and we're not able to communicate because of the system we were using, all right? Mark mentioned it was old. Okay, so then this year, or later in the year, we decided over spring break, okay, we're gonna transition to this new modern system. And so we did, and of course, it didn't work as it should have over the spring break. And people who were on using GPS watching their kids suddenly couldn't watch them anymore. Part of the issue, as Mark mentioned, is the compatibility with Power School and how we're inputting data into Power School. So over the last few months, we have been working with, what consultant are we on with Traversa now?
number 3.
We've worked with 3 different consultants with this bus transportation system to try to get it to work with our unique Power School system that we have for student information. So we're on to the 3rd guy. He's supposedly their best person, but our transportation folks are pulling their hair out because they're putting inputs into the system, and the system is changing the inputs. So it'll identify a kid as special ed. Next day, well, if they're not special ed anymore, they're on a different, so we still have not cracked the code on fixing this moving forward, but I think between Mark and Eric Simmons, our tech director, they're putting together a plan for looking at how we're inputting data into the system. And so, again, I own the fact that, yep, the communication strategy was we were going to let folks know in mid-July that, if we're going to impact their lives by the reduction of routes, and that didn't happen. But again, I think my frustration is we have these systems we're using that are working with these vendors, and for whatever reason, they are not working with our internal systems that we utilize, and people's lives are being impacted by it. And so we have to fix it, and we're gonna fix it. And, I think they're thinking that the 3rd time's the charm with the consultant we're using here, but they're still meeting how many times a week? A couple times a week?
We're meeting every day.
Yeah.
Sometimes for 20 minutes and sometimes for 4 hours. And I really want to give a shout out to Lisa Siegfrieds, who's our transportation supervisor. She created a Band-Aid from spring break to the end of the year, so families didn't know that this issue was going on, to say, hey, she found out a way to get us just the end of the school year. And then this summer, we could really just start to peel back the onion and say, okay, what's the real issue? And we've been really digging into June, July, and now here at the beginning of August. So, yeah, no, we literally every single day have a meeting with this person here to dig in. I'll say, here's the issues yesterday, fix this, but then it opens up, well, now X, Y, and Z came up. Okay, now how do we fix this one? And once that's fixed, then the next issue comes down the line. So.
And in my experience as a superintendent, I have never seen this.
Is it a systems compatibility issue? Both sides, or?
I think it's partially compatibility issue, it's partially how we're inputting data into the system.
So we're on it.
So this is probably a stupid question, and it probably goes to the technology, problems that you've run into with these systems, but, and this is something that I picked up from some of the things that I saw online, because there are parents who now, 4 weeks or 3 weeks before school starts, they don't have transportation for their student because they're within the 2-mile radius. I mean, why is it that we couldn't identify those folks? I mean, can't we just draw a circle around, a 2-mile circle around the school, and then say, okay, you're not in this, the area anymore. So they're getting, they've just gotten the notice so late.
Correct. For the most part, yes, but if we wanted to make sure that we get everybody who was affected to get the email, it took us time to make sure our imports were correct, because coming a few weeks ago, they were not coming over to make sure we had the exact data. And we wanted to make sure that we didn't tell families that didn't need it or exclude families that actually needed to get it.
This isn't like something, okay, we're just not gonna, we have had thoughtful discussions throughout the summer on this, and part of the discussion we had with communications in early July was, okay, the push we were feeling was we need to let families know. Okay, well, do we know what families are gonna be impacted yet? Well, no, not exactly. So then the tension, internal tension on the decision-making was, all right, do we let families know that, okay, this is coming? And then, okay, well, is it gonna impact me? And how do I know? And we'll let you know in a few weeks. Or do we just, hold status quo until we knew exactly who was gonna be impacted? So, and again, I am probably more frustrated with this issue than anything that I've been part of this district. This should not be rocket science. I've never seen this in my career. And it happened at the start of last school year with a different system. It's happening with a new system this year. And there's no excuse for it, none. And again, you're right. Families should have been known. They should have been told 3 weeks ago.
100%. It's not as simple as drawing a 2-mile radius, because it's not as the crow flies. It's actually from front of door to driveway of house. So the 2-mile line isn't just a circle around. It kind of goes, depending where the roads go, it kind of squiggles its way around. Mm-hmm. So to make sure we had the most accurate information, that's what we had to navigate. So like Dr. Funk said, it's not acceptable, and moving forward, we will make sure that doesn't happen again. But unfortunately, we weren't able to make sure we had a true list until last week.
Go ahead.
So, the consequence of fewer people getting busing is more people driving to school, more parents dropping off. Is there, I don't know, is that enough of an impact at the schools that are gonna have more, including the gate parents that, maybe aren't utilizing the hub, all having to drive now as far as stacking of cars? I mean, it's, at the middle school, at Stillwater Middle, that's already nightmarish.
Yep.
At pickup time anyway. Have the consequences of more vehicles been taken into account? Is there a way to deal with that and change the way that drop-off happens or pickup happens?
In terms of Stillwater Middle, there's really the circle that you have to drop off, because the other entrance is the buses. And we don't want to mix cars with buses in terms of kids walking through. So it's really just utilizing that drop-off circle.
Mark,
So the short answer is no.
No.
at least the 4-5 gate has a separate entrance too. I just know that because we lost our busing when we were in 4th grade. So all the parents from the south had to drive. So we definitely had a different, it's not the same. So it is actually a separate one, but the 6th, 7th, 8th
Right.
gate parents will have to deal with that. So yeah, there is a separate one, at least at Stillwater Middle.
I would imagine there's a variance in the drop-off capacity. I mean, we're not, how many families were impacted? Was
About
it
100.
100 at each school, or 100 in, okay.
About 100 each school, yep.
Do we know when we made the transportation decision, and this might be more of a Carissa question. Did families get an email when we made the decision, like in a newsletter? Because usually major decisions we do.
Yes, there was some communication, not much. There was, I think, one newsletter article that went
Okay.
out in the spring after we talked about it at a board meeting.
Okay. I just think, and I know that you're doing this, but just evaluating the
Well,
communications
yeah,
process
I think
from
that's you know, one of the things that we discussed was, so if we're not gonna send a blast out to families saying this might be coming, can we do it as part of a newsletter? And I think the newsletter had already hit the deadline, and so, but yeah, that was part of the communication discussion.
Yeah. It's so hard because I know as a parent, you're hit with so much information. And no matter how many times I think that we probably would have communicated it, short of getting that letter that says your address, your home is being impacted, I don't know that it would have registered fully. I mean, certainly there's improvement, I think, in the process from communications to operations and technology and how it's operating, and to those families, I mean, obviously we apologize because it wasn't the intention. Just looking forward to, because I remember that it was a lot hectic at the beginning of the last school year with transportation. Are we anticipating a repeat of that once transportation does start? Are we thinking we're gonna see an improvement from where we were last year? Just
Yes, we anticipate improvement. We had summer school that just ended, where we had summer school not only for us, for St. Croix Prep, for 916, for White Bear. We transport everybody that is in our district, so we don't just work on our schedule, we work on the 916 schedule, we work on the White Bear schedule, all the different entities, and we did it very smoothly here for summer school. So there's always the beginning of the year, we transport about 8,000 kids. You know, so there's always gonna be, you know, we moved, or, you know, my daycare now, we're going to this daycare versus, there's always those things that come up, but in terms of the volume of issues, we don't anticipate it to be anywhere near where it was last year.
And I think with the newer system, we're able to update. So families, if we do have to update, they will know, or they should be able to know, as opposed to the old one we've been utilizing.
okay. So we don't anticipate, if there are technology changes after you and Eric work together with the superintendent, I'm assuming we'll find out about those at the board if something needs to be changed, or,
You should see something in the updates.
okay.
We should be fine. I think we've crossed our fingers, we've crossed the threshold now that we're moving in the right direction now for about since early last week.
Okay. And if families, I know the one option that is available to them, and you hate to have like a flood of phone calls, but if there was a stop closer to the house and there was a room on that bus, which sometimes there is, what is the process for families to look into that? How should they
Contact the
navigate that?
transportation department after school starts, so about 2 weeks after school starts. We have to get everybody routed, get the school year up and running, and then if spots are available, not only spots available, but also if there's ghost students. So for instance, right now, somebody may be enrolled, because families are quick to enroll, they're not very quick to de-enroll. So we moved to Rochester, we moved somewhere else, and I moved to Rochester, I'm gonna enroll and make sure my kid's there. I may not tell my previous school I'm not coming. But so they're in our system, we route them, then we'll run the first 2 weeks, and then if a student isn't there the first 2 weeks, then we'll start to do audits of our routes to say who's getting picked up, who's not. And if the student continually isn't there, we'll make a phone call to say, hey, are you here or not? Or they may leave the system because now we pull them out because we got the records released for Rochester schools or et cetera, so space opens up. So we'll route to who we know now, and then once the school year starts, as that starts to even itself out, then families can contact us and say, yep, we got spots here, or nope, I don't have a spot there, but we do 6 blocks down the road at this spot here if you'd like to join that area. So we'll work with families from there.
And I know we say this all the time, at least since I've been on the board, I feel like we've repeated this, but if a family de-enrolls or doesn't, or decides they don't need it, they don't have to sign up for transportation as a safety net.
Correct.
Right? They can, if a need exists, or like after a month into school and they all of a sudden, their ride share didn't work out for them, they can sign up then, that at any point in time during the school year.
November, February, you pick the date, whenever you need it, give us 3 to 5 days and you'll have a stop.
And so from your perspective, it's, if you're not gonna use the bus, please don't sign up, because it impacts other people's abilities to access transportation or have space on routes. So I just think it's a community effort to know that you're actually could be harming other people if you're not using it.
Correct.
So, and I know that was new to me too when I was on, because I was one of those parents that just signed up sometimes, so. Great. Well, I appreciate you coming to the board and explaining to us. I know it doesn't make it better for the community members that were impacted, but we do apologize, and I know this is a main focus that the superintendent has talked about in terms of implementation of decisions that get made, and so I'm looking forward to those improvements. Great, thank you very much.
Expect more.
Yeah. All right, so with that, we will move into closed session. The next two, oh, I'm sorry, I wanted to say one, I'm sorry. This is, it's probably in my head that I don't want to acknowledge this. Okay, so for the community, we have a change on the school board coming. Our beloved Dr. Porbeni is having some changes in her life. And so she is going to explain some of those and we would just like to give her a moment here to update the community on some things going on with her. And I would like to, I guess, formally say that you have given us your notice that you will be serving until the last day in August. So the end of this month, and then she will be moving on. And so I'll turn it over to you to have a few final words.
Thank you, Chair Sherman, and thanks to my colleagues here as well, and to Dr. Funk, the administrative team, staff. It's been almost 4 years, and I think I've had the great honor of working with all of you, everyone present here. It wasn't easy at first, but I think we made it through. Unfortunately, or fortunately, not sure which one it is, my family, my husband and the kids moved out of town last year. I decided to stay put because I wanted to complete my, 4 years and make sure I'm working with my colleagues here. But the travels have been a bit too hectic. And the last thing I want to do is to miss board meetings. And I think I owe it to all of you to be here, to serve, to continue to serve, considering the fact that that's what the community, voted for me for. So I had to, my husband and I sat down together, we talked about it, and I felt the best thing would be to respect everyone who got me into this position, to respect my colleagues here as well, our students, community, and also staff, to put in my resignation. So the end of the month will be the last time I'll be here. It's really difficult. I thought I could, hang on. I've been the only one here the last 1 year here in Minnesota, while the family's been out of town in Georgia, actually. But I am truly grateful to all those who made it possible for me to be here. We came together. I remember Allison, Katie, Pete the first time, Bev, including Tina, that is no longer with us. But these were some of our best moments. The differences that we had actually brought us to where we are today. So I want to acknowledge all of the past board members that I've served with and all the current board members that are here as well. And I know we've worked together. We've made some really, really great decisions and also some really difficult decisions. But I think one of the best things we've also done is bringing Dr. Funk in here, something that I will collectively as a group, I think we'll be really proud of. Those were moments that were really difficult for us as a district. But I think, I want to say God did see us through. Because we were always in the media, there was always something going on. Our students, student government, all of the support. I cannot thank the community enough for all those who made it possible for us to continue to serve day in, day out. Thank you. There were parents as well, members of our community, parents that were here to provide guidance for us and lead us through some difficult times, but also some of the best times that we've had. So to the members of our community, I want to say a big thank you to you. for all your support, all your encouragement, all your advice. It's been the best thing I've ever done, you know, and I think the past 4 years has actually shown I'm not going to cry. I really want to thank our community. They're the reason why we come back here every day, and also to thank our students, staff. I said I'm not going to cry. Woodbury has been my home for the past 22 years. The district has been our home for the past 22 years. And the district, I would say our kids spend more time here at the district, much more than they spend at home. The success of our children, I would speak for mine, most of it has been because we've been in this district. And I could never, my husband and I would never forget what this district has done for us. And I truly want to thank you all for that. I want to thank you for all the values and for what we stand for. I know that change initially was hard. A lot of people in our community, both parents and everyone, were part of the change. So I want to say a big thank you again to our students for sticking with us, actually, and for helping us to make some of the decisions that we've made. I will never forget this district. We will never forget this district. It's a part of our lives. It's a huge part of my children's lives. And we're where we are today because of this district. So, and to all of you. And so for that, I want to say thank you. Thanks to all those who stood by me when I was trying to make the decision. I wasn't sure. I still remember Allison and I saying, should we not? I can't believe that it's been almost 4 years. Staff, thank you. You guys have supported me. You have been there. You have worked with us to make the change that we see today. Couldn't have had, a better group of people. So thank you to all of you. You always ask about my children, and so I sincerely appreciate that. And that's when you know that you're truly in a place where people really do care. So thank you. Dr. Funk, thank you for coming to us. Thank you for being here. It's one of our most difficult times, but you chose to come here. Mm-hmm. Thanks to my colleagues, Chair Sherman, my former chair, Petrie. Thank you. It was wonderful serving with you. I really appreciate your leadership. And I also want to acknowledge your leadership here. You are a huge strength. And I really want to recognize that today. You're something else. Let's put it that way.
This is about you.
I know, but this is just an appreciation of the leadership of the group that I've worked with. Katie, you're a rock. I know you always say you're quiet, but you have been incredible. Pete, the second time, sometimes the charm. Here you are, and I really appreciate you. I got to know you in the first, when we first ran together. Very proud and very happy that you could make it the second time. So it's been really wonderful working with you as well.
Thank you.
Andrew, Chris, the newbies in the group. I really appreciate both of you. I saw Andrew the first time on LinkedIn, and I went, well, who is this? But I didn't realize that he was going to be running. But I really appreciate that connection, that contact. And since then, we've been friends much more than just being board members. And so I really appreciate you. And Chris, I appreciate everything about you. Got to know you through, actually, Bev, because we asked some questions when you were running as well. And so I think since being with you here, I've gotten to know you a bit more as well, and appreciate your insights a great deal. So to all of you, thank you. Joan, Carissa, Mark, So these are the older ones here with me. I really want to thank you guys. It's been 4 years. I knew you guys before I ran. But I want to say a big thank you to you for all your support. I called you always. So thank you. Mark, thank you for all the work. I knew you as a principal at Brookview before your appointment. And so I want to thank you also for all the support over the years. And of course, we have our accountant there, Marie. We have our executive director of human resources. We have our new group there. It's not, you're not new, right? Yeah, I know. I know. Then we have our deputy there as well. But really, you've all, the new ones actually, you're in the right place. It's the right time, the right place. We've got everything. I mean, look at, we talked about making sure our board participation is boring, and I think we succeeded in doing that because we're doing our work. Actually, that was a campaign slogan that we had. And because we wanted to do work, and work we did. So we really appreciate you guys coming to our district and wanting to be a part of this. We've seen the work you've done, the work you've been doing. And so I'd like to say thank you to all of you as well.
Well, Annie, I know that I think there's some people, I see them making notes that they might want to say something back to you. So
Okay, so
does anyone have any comments?
Going to
I
end it
saw
here.
Katie had something to say.
I'm going to end it here. Thank you all.
Geez, Annie. Oh, no, I should not have gone first. First of all, I just wanted to acknowledge the sacrifice that you've made the last year. Like, your family moved away a year ago, and you've been flying on the weekends to go see your family. I mean, that is an incredible sacrifice that you've had to make in order to continue to serve this district. So thank you for lasting this long, and I totally respect your decision to be with them, finally, after a long year. And just serving with you, your grace and attitude and just your gratitude that you've just demonstrated for all of us, is just case in point for your character. And you've brought so much to this board, your respect and your thoughtful points that you make all the time that are just so insightful. I really appreciate that, and we will all miss that. So thank you for serving with us. We'll miss you a lot.
Anyone else? Yes?
So we first filed together right in Joan's office, and when we were leaving the building, Eric Anderson was there. He took a picture of us holding up our filings. And that picture constantly comes up in my camera roll on my Alexa on my desk and just reminds me of what you've done and what we've done together. And then outside of the formality of these meetings, we've had a lot of nice talks in the parking lot. Everybody's gone. We're still there for half an hour talking about what's going on
Were there
here.
4 of you or just 2 of you?
Just two.
So here in these parking lots at Lake Elmo Family Night, we've had some just great conversations, so I've really gotten to know you then. And I really appreciate that. We've had a lot of laughs together. And I've also gotten to know your kids through my bus driving activities. I've gotten to know your kids from driving routes and driving their games. And they could motivate anybody just looking at what they accomplish and the grit and determination they have. So you've done well by them. You've done well by us. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Yeah, Annie, Katie's stealing my words, like
I know.
thoughtful and insight. I mean, it's just, it's amazing. There's a quiet passion for the community, for the education, for our children. And, you said, they ask you about your children, you always ask me about mine. And that means so much. You're right, that really shows like that you're in the right place and you're here for us. And I really do appreciate that. And the sacrifice, being away from your family, I can't imagine how you've done that and, and still manage to, function. So you've earned your final flight. Yeah, congratulations and thank you.
Well, Annie, so it was about 4 years ago now that you and I and 3 other people ran for school board, and it was an interesting election, and all five of us were elected, and it was kind of a trial by fire, because, you know, if we remember back, that was the pandemic, and it was all about masking, and it was, you know, students working, you know, going to school from home. It was pretty wild there for a while. And one of the things that I remember is just how you were always able to bring a different point of view that I had not really considered, and I doubt that anybody else at the board table had considered. And you were constantly trying to get everybody to find the center of the Venn diagram, the consensus. And I think it's actually one of your best strengths is that you're always working to find that middle ground. And you have been just absolutely integral to our efforts to sort of make this a professional school board. And we are going to miss you dearly.
So Annie, thank you. It's been so great to get to know you the last year and a half. You know, you see people on the you know, the school board meetings and when you're watching them, or you see them in person, but it's just been such a pleasure to get to know you. You're just a fantastic, smart, thoughtful person, and as Bev mentioned, I mean, just the perspective you have brought has been just eye-opening, and we've been so lucky as a district to have you. You have helped put us in a much more stable place, and what a cool legacy that you get to look back on as Stillwater continues to do great things, and it can be a source of pride for you because you know you had a very big part of that. So thank you for your selfless and your thoughtful and your caring service, because you know it just is who you are at your core, and I'm excited you get to be reunited with your family, and I'm excited for what these new endeavors might look like, and but we are even more excited to have you back, and especially when you open these brand new beautiful schools we got to look at tonight. So so thank you, and miss you, and hope we get to see you still soon.
I love these things, you know. So I'll share this with you, Annie. You know, this was probably a couple of years ago, and it was one of my early meetings with the board, and we were talking about an issue, and I think Vivian was talking, and I think you were talking, and you were both speaking about some things in the system that weren't necessarily the best things that we did in the system, and how they impacted the lives of your children. And I really listened to that, and then as I got to know you better, one of the things that I think is at your core and is consistent with one of my real values is it best for kids? Is what we are doing best for kids? And so when I am bringing issues to the board that may not be the most popular issues in the wider community, I've always had exceptional value for your perspective, because you are looking at a lens as, is this best for kids? And I couldn't have asked for a more supportive director on the board. So, and I've had a lot of directors that I've worked with over the years. So just want to thank you for that, Annie, and thank you for your sacrifice, and wish you the best of luck getting back together with your family in Georgia. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Annie, I mean, I've known you for so long, and your kids, and Francis, your husband, and I mean, I really feel like we need to thank your son, the one that is left at home, and Francis for kind of letting the district have you a little bit longer. And this is way long overdue. I mean, you have been so kind to stay a part of this, and it does speak to your passion. And I always think you're just kind of such an interesting person, because you have such a cool person. I mean, I don't even think of you as like a director. It's just, I've known you for so long. You're just a cool human being. You just are. You just have cool insight into, I mean, you've brought that happiness and that gratitude and that joy here. And you're so smart and you're just so, I don't know, your kids are such a reflection of both you and your husband. And the district's been lucky to have you, and we've been lucky to get to know you. And you're just equal parts really strong, but just really kind. And it's just such an interesting dynamic with you just as a person. So just thank you for being you and for bringing that insight and that kindness and that joy to the board table. And we've appreciated your sacrifice, and I know that you're appreciative of everyone in the community and around this table. And so the feeling is mutual. So we wish you well. We hope you come back and visit often. And Georgia is lucky to have you. So I hope they know how lucky they are. And so thank you so much. So with that, we're now going to move to closed. So thank you very much, Annie, for taking the time to do that with us tonight. And now we're going to move to closed. And the next two items on the agenda are closed session. The first
Did you say we were doing two closed sessions?
Yeah,
I know it said two, it's one.